Hi everybody, welcome to episode 24 of the Teesside Business Podcast. Today we're very lucky to be joined by Claire Preston of Soundtraining. Thank you so much for coming down to see us.
Thanks for asking me, Mike.
This is really good timing for this podcast, actually, how it worked out. So we chatted a while ago about you coming on the podcast and got the date and everything, but actually you won Businesswoman of the Year last week. So congratulations firstly for all that. So it's great timing to get you on here and get your opinions about stuff. Stars will align kind of thing.
Great.
So we'll get straight into it. Thing we ask most people when they come on is, can you give us just a bit of a brief overview about your career history, kind of like, you know, how things went for you and how you came to Soundtraining and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Some might say I've had a bit of a checkered past, but I think what I prefer to say is I had quite a varied career. It was a funny thing. When I was at school, I never really knew what I wanted to do. I thought I might like to be a teacher, but my dad was a teacher and sort of knocked that out of me and said, no, it's really tough, and just actually actively discouraged me from being a teacher, which is quite interesting looking back now. But it was always expected that I'd go to sixth form college and university, and I went, but like I say, without any real surety of what I wanted to do. So therefore, I don't think I was very passionate about learning, was not really engaged, and spent far too much time hanging around at my friends' colleges and places of work rather than doing my A-levels. So no surprise that I left before I'd finished my A-levels. And I ended up working down in London. I saw an advert in the Evening Gazette for a nanny's job. Right. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do that. I want to get away, and just wanted to try something completely different. So my brother Andrew, he'd already moved away from home. We'd been quite close. He kind of encouraged me to do it and has encouraged me a lot through various things that I've done. And I thought, yeah, do you know what? Why not just go and try it? And that actually started me on a path of a range of different careers. So I started as a nanny, then took a job in a pub. So I met people, then got involved with the catering industry and all sorts of different things. Then started to be more interested in training and education, came back up to Middlesbrough, and got a job with what was then called the Spastic Society. Yeah. Obviously, people know it more as Scope now. Yeah. And I got a job as a training assistant. And that was fantastic for me, Mike, because I started to learn about training as a profession. Started to take some adult training qualifications, went and did my Cert Ed and Diploma in Training Management and things like that. And I had a wonderful, wonderful opportunity that one of the people that I worked with within that organisation, she and I ended up taking over the contract for that community programme and employment training scheme, as it then turned out to be. So that was an amazing experience for somebody in their early 20s, did that. And I'm really, really grateful for that. So that started me really within the adult training and education sector. Then I fancied doing something different, and I wanted to travel but didn't have any money behind me.
Bit of a catch-22.
Absolutely. So friends of mine had gone travelling the world after university and things, and I hadn't. But a friend of mine was an air hostess and suggested that I apply for that, and I did. And subsequently worked at out of Manchester Airport. I worked for an airline called Britannia, and I did that for a year. And again, that was a great experience, not as glamorous as everybody thinks.
I think it's quite a tough job, really.
Absolutely. And I am really glad I did it. I met some good people and had the really fortunate experience of sampling some lovely quality hotels that I wasn't used to by any means at that point, and had fantastic times in America and one really memorable week in Kenya, where you used to be paid for every hour that you were away at the time. So it was really, really fab. I enjoyed that, but then that was never meant to be a long-term thing. And the friend that I'd worked with previously, when we worked for the charity and within employment training, had started to work for a charity again locally here in Stockton, and said that there were some jobs coming up and would I be interested in working with her again. And I applied and ended up working for a charity again. That was working with adults with learning disabilities, which again I absolutely loved and did for about 5 years. And it was a really interesting time again, because what happened there was a a period of consultation within Stockton Borough Council, and they went through what was called a changeover process. So it was looking at what was the best provision for adults with learning disabilities. So it was wonderful to be involved in that because we were providers of adult services. So again, a wonderful experience, but no surprises that I got itchy feet again, and actually took a sabbatical and joined a friend who'd been doing some charity work over in South Africa. Okay. So we went over to Cape Town and spent a little bit of time in the townships there, and then travelled a little bit further around South Africa in Namibia, Botswana, right up to Zimbabwe, up to Victoria Falls for the Millennium.
Oh, I bet that was phenomenal.
Oh, it was absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. I'll never forget it. It was a remarkable experience. And then what happened was, I think as a result of that, I came back to Stockton and Billingham where I was working at the time, and I realised that my heart wasn't in that job anymore, and it needed to be for the level of responsibility that I had. So I decided to move on again, and I actually headed for London, where my brother and his wife were living at the time. And he encouraged me not to just rush into another job. So I took some time to think about what I wanted to do, and was actually walking in Islington one day and called into a restaurant and asked if they had any jobs, and I started working in a restaurant. And
just kind of felt the pull to...
Absolutely. I just thought, you know what, let's just do something that's no responsibility, just a bit of fun for a while. And to cut a long story short, did that, became a manager, and then went abroad to teach English. I wanted to start using teaching and training qualifications again, so decided to go and teach English in Barcelona and then Japan. Came back from there and went back to London, and I was really meant to be saving again so I could go away teaching, possibly to Vietnam or somewhere like that. And while I was working in a restaurant again, I was offered a job by somebody who had just opened a new restaurant in London, which had won an award for Best New London Restaurant. Right. So I was offered a job as a manager there, which I took after some real consideration, because I was either going to do that or go travelling again. Yeah. But did it, and then ended up doing that for years. And again, that was a remarkable opportunity and experience, Mike, because we ended up turning that one restaurant into a small chain that opened around London. God. So the experience that then gave me has been a remarkable aid in the job that I'm in currently. Yeah.
I've heard when you've worked in like hospitality and restaurants, especially in like that kind of environment, that everything is easy after that, because a lot of people don't realise.
Do you know, that's a really good way of looking at it. Yeah, and I do believe that everyone should have to do it, because you just...
people say retail or restaurant.
Absolutely.
Just,
you learn a lot about people, and it really doesn't hurt to say please or thank you, and there's no need to be rude to people.
It's something that I'd never ever understand. That it's the most bonkers thing to me, that you would be rude to somebody who's about to bring you something you were about to eat. That just seems the most ludicrous thing I could ever.
I think you'd be surprised. Surprised. But no, it is. It's a great industry, but it is more of a lifestyle as well. Yeah. So once I had my baby daughter, I was starting to already think then, although I was working in a management position, I was starting to think that maybe I needed to do something different. And I moved back up north at that point. I really wanted to be back in Teesside around family, and for my daughter to grow up around Teesside. And I decided to study again. So I went back to uni, which was hard actually, because I went back as a part-time student, and I was doing work experience in primary school and in secondary school, as well as holding down a couple of jobs and commuting up and down to London. Yeah. So I was still working part-time in London. So that was a tough few years, but I'm so glad I did it, because at the end of that, I then heard about Katie Parkinson, who had founded Soundtraining, and got in touch with her, and the rest is history. Yeah. So give us, because obviously it is quite complex what Soundtraining do, but can you give us a brief overview of what you guys do within the education sector and things like that? Absolutely. So, as I said, Katie Parkinson is the founder director of Soundtraining, and she worked as a teacher for many years, and then specialised in literacy and dyslexia. And she worked for Middlesbrough Borough Council, and as a result of the work that she was doing in schools in the area, she recognised that there was a lot more that could be done to support students who really were underachieving. There are so many students, and still continue to be many students that are underachieving, and she was really concerned that the work that was being done in schools on an intervention basis, yes, it was supportive, yes, it might have been making a bit of difference, but not enough. So she took an immense amount of time and was dedicated enough to come up with a range of activities after a period of about 12 years of research, to come up with a period of activity, a group of activities which actually increase reading ages significantly and dramatically. And what it is, it's a system which increases phonological awareness.
Yep.
So thinking about sound and processing sound, it looks at decoding words, and it looks at the morphology and the structure of words and etymology, so where those roots are from, and actually gives students of whatever age the ability to access language more effectively.
Yeah.
So for students that have been struggling with literacy, it really is incredibly powerful. But similarly, for learners who have achieved quite a lot, but recognise that they could benefit from additional vocabulary development or extended academic language knowledge, etc. It just works right across the board. It's amazing.
Which, that's not exactly a small segment. Obviously it helps not only with education, but I know we've chatted before and things like that, but just literacy and being able to read opens the doorway to like so many things. Like,
completely.
One of the things that I'm always really, really glad is that when I was learning to read, I hated it. But my mum like physically made me sit down and taught me how to read. It's something I'm eternally grateful for, because like I became an avid reader straight away after that, and still do. And Rick, who produced the podcast behind the camera, is, and obviously we have a lot of books in the office that seem to come and go, and everyone brings a lot of stuff. But it's something that everybody talks about, like being able to read opens so many doorways, and it's that education of that helps so many people. When it comes to education and people kind of being, I don't want to say left behind in education.
I know what you mean.
Because obviously, cards on the table, I'm never trained as an educator. I've never worked in a classroom. It's really easy for me to sit here and say, well, they should get more individual care and class size should be smaller and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not in a position to do that. Is it a case of those things actually like affecting and, it's...
Do you know, that's a really interesting point, Mike. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that class size isn't actually as important as people think.
Yeah.
Do you know what fundamentally is the answer? Quality teaching.
Yeah.
Quality teaching is the answer. And whilst I completely understand and appreciate many of the challenges of the teaching profession, it is really tough. It's very, very tough. There are some amazing examples of quality teachers, and we work with thousands of teachers and hundreds of schools in the UK and internationally now, in the Middle East and in America. And what stands out is a number of things, actually. Teachers that are passionate, or leaders that are passionate, because a lot of it does boil down to leadership. So leaders that are passionate, teachers and leaders that care and have the right ethos and are there delivering education for the right reasons.
Yep.
And actually, and students, individuals, they know when teachers care about them. They really, really do. And I've worked with some young students fairly recently who had a little bit of an attitude initially. And then once I spent a bit of time with them, they opened up. And once I showed an interest in them, what a surprise, they were interested in what I was saying.
Yeah.
And sometimes there isn't time for that.
Yeah.
I do understand that. But there is a huge amount that could be done in terms of teaching provision, and I do see huge inequity in education provision. Yeah.
So obviously, do you think, I probably know the answer to it before I would say it's one of those things where a lot of, there's that saying that teachers are born, not made. And we can all think of, a handful of teachers that we've had in our lives that really either affect us, whether it be in education or in other forms.
Yeah.
Do you think that it, like, I'm trying to find a good way to phrase the question, really. So obviously, things happen within the classroom where people get left behind and things like that. Is it a case of just getting teachers early on in their career to teach them the correct way of teaching and dealing with kids, or some naturally get it because they've got an innate talent for it, and can everybody do it? And is it teaching? Do you get what I'm trying to say?
I do, and I think it's a bit of both, Mike. I think it might be a bit controversial, but there are issues with initial teacher training.
Yeah.
And I think the fact, don't get me wrong, obviously there are people out there who are far more qualified to make these comments than I am. And I take my hat off to teachers. I really, really do. They're doing an amazing job. But initial teacher training needs to provide teachers, as you say, with the skills that they need to do the job properly and effectively. Now, one of the things that we find, an analogy that I've used recently, is that when we teach teachers, many of them who have years and years, up to 30 years experience of teaching, they don't know what we teach them. What Lexonic teaches them, Lexonic as a teaching program for teachers, when we teach them, they don't understand how they didn't know that. Yeah. And they understand the power of what we teach them and the impact that's going to have on their teaching and learning. Yeah. So our argument is, well, if it makes that much difference to teaching and learning, every teacher needs to have this as part of initial teacher training, because that is giving them more strategies and greater skills and knowledge to actually provide better quality teaching and that will benefit everybody. But I've used the analogy recently that if you were going to be a brain surgeon, you would have to learn 100% of anatomy first, and you need to know that literally inside out, no pun intended there, but literally the whole thing. So for us, we see that literacy and teaching to read is actually the foundations. It's the anatomy of teaching, because actually how can teachers, the best subject teachers in the world, need to be able to teach vocabulary and reading. Yeah. And one of the reasons why people, the term that you use is being left behind, one of the reasons for that achievement gap is that many, many students, for lots of different reasons, have not had the strategies that they need to access learning. Yeah. Okay? And it gets to a point where they're going to switch off. They're just not interested because it's too hard. And as humans, we all stop doing things when it becomes too hard, whether it's exercise and whether it's learning to play the piano, whatever that might be. So when it's hard, you don't want to do it. And exactly the same applies with reading. Yeah. So lots of people, like you say, we love reading. Yeah. Many, many people are fortunate enough to. And how wonderful would it be if everybody did? Oh, yeah. There are so many benefits. But actually, if you can't read well, if you can't read fluently, there's no pleasure in it. So why would you?
Yeah, why would you pursue it?
Why would you? Yeah. So there's a huge issue for us and for us as a society, because we need to make sure that people have the ability to read in order to then encourage reading for pleasure. Yeah. So we teach reading for knowledge, which helps in an education setting, but obviously that leads to reading for pleasure. Yeah. But if you think about it, I mean, the average reading age of people in the UK is 9.
Which is crazy, really, when you really start thinking
about
it.
It's staggering. And there really isn't any excuse for it. Obviously, there's been a lot of investment, a lot of focus on early years, and that is improving because there's a huge acknowledgement of the need for developing vocabulary in youngsters before they start school. Obviously, the whole argument about mobile phones and technology and the lack of conversation that takes place in many, many homes, that does affect people's exposure to vocabulary.
But even when I'm thinking about it, obviously there's the whole like tech speak and things like that I'll leave for the side. But everything that you consume on a mobile device is still reading. You know what I mean? So if people... just thinking within our sectors, if they're, I hate using that term left behind, there must be a better term that I can use, 'cause it sounds really offensive.
Underachieving.
Underachieving, thank you. At an early stage, obviously, as we go more and more technology based, they're going to struggle more and more. So it's like, I can see just like a completely knock-on effect, even if they're in their mid-teens now, but when they're 20, 30, 40 years technology, because it is all screen-based and literary based.
Absolutely.
Because obviously there's a lot more like video coming out and and that kind of thing, but I can, just as I'm thinking out loud, I can see
no, absolutely thing. And it's funny you should say that, because when students go through the Lexonic program, they absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. And realistically, to have especially teenage boys who are interested in a literacy session and want more, that's pretty special. So Katie has created something remarkable, but we get amazing feedback and comments from students and teachers. But one of the best ones was that one teenage boy was, "Oh, that's amazing, I can read the instructions on my Xbox now." And yes, so you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yes, technology is developing, but literacy will always be needed.
Yeah.
And there are lots of other skills that will be needed too. And there's a huge argument and a movement at the moment in order to prepare young people for the future. And what does that look like? Because so many jobs of the future don't exist yet, but they're always going to need literacy.
Massively. Like, we were talking in the office the other day, Mike, who's in the office next door, and myself, both, he has 2 daughters, I have 1 daughter, and we were talking about just mobile phone time and, you know, how we were going to think about it. Obviously, we're a social media company, so it's something I think about a lot. And he brought up somebody that he'd heard, like speaking on a video, and who is a very well known businessman, a bloke called Gary Vaynerchuk, who said that he was promoting his kids to use mobile devices more because that's the way it was going. Whether we like it or not as a society, like the society doesn't care. That's just the way it's happening. But it's having those skills to know how to use those devices correctly. And like you say, if you can't read, then you just a massive chunk that you're going to miss before you even start.
Absolutely.
And there is such like a benefit if they can't read, you know, there's a lot of, but like even playing Xbox and stuff, that I suppose there's text that comes up on the game and they'll enjoy that more. And it's when I really start thinking about it, how much it can affect.
Absolutely.
One of the things that was really, really curious to ask you, obviously one of the great benefits of your job, I suppose the way to put it, is that you do get to travel around a lot and see you know, different parts of Western society, and obviously, you know, you said you spent
advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, I can imagine it's both. We were talking about it just before the podcast started. Not as glamorous as what people think, but so the great kind of thing I suppose that you get from there and seeing the education systems as you travel around. What kind of stuff are we doing really well in the UK, as you know, when it comes to your kind of area? That other people would benefit from, or have you seen anything in other countries where you think, you know what, that's an amazing way to like set that up or teach that we could benefit from? Do you ever see anything like that? Or
that's a really good question.
I know that is quite a very broad question.
That is a really good question. Do you know what's interesting? There are many similarities. I don't think you see one particular outstanding thing in any of the countries that we've travelled in. That the approaches are the approaches, because there's a lot of research-based education. So lots of practice is based on research, which is international. And some of the schools that we're working in the Middle East, for example, they work with the British curriculum anyway. And schools in Texas, Florida, San Francisco, so California, and up in Maine where we've worked, there are so many similarities. Students are students, kids are kids. They have the same issues, they have the same learning needs to a large extent. And teachers have the same challenges generally. But I think what's really interesting for me is that we work with some outstanding schools. We really, really do. I mean, there are some here on our doorstep. There's Tees Valley Education Trust, and they do some incredible things. There's Acton Grange in Middlesbrough. And then that's reflected by schools like the British School in Muscat, who have such a fantastic learning philosophy and ethos, but it aligns so closely with some of what I see here in Middlesbrough. So I would have to say that is down to leadership, like we were saying. And I think often one of the things that I come across is that successful schools have leaders who are willing to be a little bit more innovative. So they are willing to take some risks, which I appreciate is a tough call often, depending on governance and accountability, and obviously the criteria that people have to meet because of Ofsted or whatever the governing body might be, or inspectorate. But successful leaders do take risks because things have to change, they have to evolve. You have to be looking at what works and evaluating things and re-evaluating things constantly. And like I say, in order to prepare students for the future, we've got to change, haven't we? We can't just keep doing what we've already done. So I think on Twitter, for example, I see huge amounts of exchange of good practice and information sharing, and I think everyone is willing to share. And the majority of people who are in teaching are in it for the same reasons. They have the same vision, and they want to create generations of successful and happy, confident.
It is, like I can't fathom anybody who would get into teaching, which is you know, I can't even start thinking about what a difficult job it would be, not only to actually teach children and reach them and get them to engage and stuff like that, but also to deal with the constraints that they've got, like you say, through Ofsted on whatever else that they may have going. I can't see anybody ever going into it, you know, a cash out, as it were. You know, you've got to be in it because, you know, you love teaching, and it is like a phenomenal thing. One thing I was really keen to ask you as well is, we've talked about it before, and I've talked about it with a couple of people podcasts, but how education aligns with going self-employed in business, entrepreneurship, whatever term that you'd like to use. Like, I was an average student at best, like a C student, but it was purely because of just how my mind works. Like, we've had a coffee and talked about it before, but and you know, I've talked with like Andy about it and stuff like that. That is, I personally don't think it's set up very well for guiding people down into be self-employed, purely because I think that they've got to deal with the mean average, you know, that you've got to do what's best for everyone, which was generally, you know, education and those kind of things, where the minority end up going on their own businesses. Is there a shift happening? Am I like, you know, I've been, you know, I left school in, you know, what, 1998, no, 99, something like that. A long time ago. So I'm making these claims with actually having no experience or evidence. So I could be way out there.
Well, no, I think you're right. And when I was at school, I mean, I left in '84. The careers guidance was atrocious. It was appalling. I think there's still a huge amount of work to be done in terms of career guidance, although people are trying. But one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about, and you're right, we have talked about this before, is how we link business with education and also build confidence within students and actually expose them to a whole range of opportunity and experience. So they understand the world of opportunity that's out there, and it's not defined to what the dad did or what the mum or the sister or brother has always done. And as we've said, the world is changing anyway, and so there are lots more opportunities which will be presented. But one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about is, like you say, entrepreneurialism. And whilst Soundtraining isn't my business, I love the business side of things, and Katie was brave enough to set up the business herself. Lots of people aren't. But I work with a voluntary organisation called Young Enterprise. So I'm on the volunteer board of that charity. And that was set up recently in Teesside, although it's been running for many years nationally. And that's brilliant because that runs a programme where business people can go into schools and support students in schools setting up businesses. And it's absolutely amazing, Mike, because what it does, it actually encourages groups of students to set up a board. They come up with business plans, they appoint, they recruit, they have an accountant, they have a managing director, they have a marketing manager, a sales team, creative designers. It's absolutely amazing. And they work together on business plans. They have to come up with a product, they have to sell the product, they have to present. It's a little bit like the mini apprentice kind of thing, but amazing. And when you talk to these students afterwards, as I did earlier this year when it was the finals, the area finals, the experience that they've gone through and how it's grown them as individuals is incredible. It's really fascinating. And they actually say, well, I wanted to be X, but now I'm going to be an accountant because I'm really good with numbers, or I'm going to run my own marketing company, and it's just really, really changing their outlook on what's open to them. So not only is it incredibly enlightening, it's also empowering because it gives them confidence in themselves and they see themselves differently.
I think that's a phenomenal. I didn't even know that there was something like that taking place, but
there are other companies that do it as well, and so it is happening. It is happening, but I agree with you that there needs to be more.
I think it is, like, it's great for me to sit here and say that, like, there needs to be more, but it must be such a hard thing to actually implement, purely because a lot of the, you know, students that are in education currently will be working on jobs that don't yet exist.
Absolutely.
So especially when it comes to business, like when I've talked to you know, other business people and things like that, and ourselves, and when we've really thought about it, we thought, well, it didn't exist as a thing till we created it. Like there wasn't a job. Like you created this thing that like it became a business. Yeah. So it's quite hard to imagine as an education and go, well, you're going to start this thing that doesn't exist yet. And,
well, I agree, but that goes back to what I was saying about preparing students for the future. So if you think about the yes, of course there are core skills. Yeah. And there are many things that will be transferable, but what we need to do is really develop students so that they have resilience, they can be adaptable, they can be confident, they can have inquiring minds, they are creative. And so we need to really, really develop those skills and harness that and provide the opportunities for those to grow. Absolutely. So that then they can adapt to whatever the future offers, or come up with really creative and innovative ideas for new businesses, new products, etc. So
it is. There's a barking dog somewhere, but it's not our dog, which is quite strange. The next door must have a dog, so I apologise for anybody listening.
Be out in the alley.
It must be out in the alley or something next door. I've got a dog. Sorry for everybody listening. You would know it if it was our dog barking.
It's not going too through much.
No, okay. So one of the things that was really keen talk to you about, and if you want to talk about, obviously, you and your brother both share quite similar traits when it comes to like entrepreneurship and things like that. You've both kind of like, not similar traits, but because obviously Andy came from finance and et cetera, et cetera. But you both have kind of gone down the business person route and things like that. But you said that your dad was a teacher and things like that. Like I asked Andy once if when I'd met you and things, I actually asked him, were your parents like entrepreneurial? He was like, no, not at all. So I thought it was quite good, that, and then you've both kind of gone opening business. Do you think it was something that was set up that's like innate in your DNA possibly, or did you just think it was...
Do you know what, that's a really, really good question again. Do you know what, I don't know. I haven't really thought about that in terms of why we are who we are. I mean, there are four of us. I've got three brothers. We're all very different. I'm flattered that you think that I'm like Andy, but I'm not. I'm also not in other ways that I'm quite grateful for. But he is incredibly successful and he works harder than anyone I've ever met. I think we have a really good work ethic. So I think that's one thing that we certainly have in common that must come from. Yeah. It must come from our family environment. Yeah. Must do. And do you know, I was going to say some confidence, but I certainly wasn't very confident when I was younger. I think it's only in recent years that I've found some confidence. And I think that's partly because I've found what I really love. And so I feel really comfortable with it. And I feel that I have a range of experience and skills that allow me to do what I do. But in terms of entrepreneurialism, I don't know where that comes from. I think we both like being with people, which obviously helps in business, because a lot of business is about relationships and the way that you deal with people. So maybe that's got something to do with it, and maybe we're quite creative and innovative, or maybe non-conformists. And
I think it comes back to that thing about risk, it's been like a very much an outsider looking in from when you told, things like Andy took a risk to move down south, and you took numerous risks of complete career changes, or like there's some people who...
That's a fair point.
I'll just go and teach in, South Africa. It must be like, that's the scariest thing that some people ever imagine. But
no, I think a lot of people would agree with you, Mike, that I do take far too many risks.
But it's not a bad thing,
No, it's funny actually, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and a few years ago we were talking about different characteristics within the team, and somebody said to me that they felt that I like to fly by the seat of my pants. Yeah. Okay. Now, some people took that as quite a negative thing. Yeah. Okay. But actually, I thought about it, and when you look at where that term comes from, I'm sure you're familiar with it, you've used it yourself probably, but it actually comes from America. So obviously you're talking about flying by the seat of your trousers. Yeah. But it was referring to pilots who actually didn't go with their navigated route, their planned route. And it was about pilots who used their perception and initiative and intuitive skills to get them to where they wanted to be. So actually I'm going to take that as a compliment. I do fly by the seat of my pants, which I appreciate drives some people mad. And of course, in business, there has to be an element of strategy as well, particularly for the people around you. But I do I do like to take risks, and I also recognise when there's an opportunity and that you have to adapt quite quickly and move with that in order to make the most of what's on offer.
I think it's like all successful people share like a very similar trait. So one of the things obviously we wanted to get to that we mentioned previously was you currently run Businesswoman of the Year. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Which was the first one that Tees businesses have won.
Okay.
So there's been very different opinions of things like that, and I'm not going to get into it because I think some of them are ridiculous, to be frank. But I think it was a phenomenal event. I thought it showed really highlighted some phenomenal businesswomen, like yourself and other people who were nominated, and newcomers and things like that as well, which was a great thing. Like there were some apprentices and things like that got nominated from. I think it was one from Venator and things like that. So phenomenal stuff. How did you find the full process in the event? Was it? Were you surprised to be nominated? Did you?
Absolutely. I was surprised to be nominated, shortlisted, and then to go on and win because as you said, there were some amazing people out there. I think first of all we need to give credit to Dave and Martin from Resolution, because they really did have a fantastic idea, and that was based on the fact that they run a poll every year looking at the top 100 business people in Teesside, and when there were 3 last year, they thought that there's something going wrong here. Yeah. So is it because women aren't good at promoting themselves? Is it because there aren't that many successful business people? We doubt it. So let's delve into this. So I think, first of all credit to them, and then all credit to the people like Northern Skills and Teesside University and SABIC and other companies who got behind it to make it happen, to sponsor the event. And I actually nominated Katie Parkinson for 2 awards, and I was really, really disappointed that she wasn't shortlisted, because I think she's incredibly inspirational, and what she's done by setting up Soundtraining and Lexonic is remarkable, and is the full benefits are yet to be seen on a massive scale, but there will be, mark my words. So I was really disappointed because of that, and I was also really embarrassed to win, because there are some amazing people out there, so obviously you don't feel worthy, and there's the whole imposter syndrome that kicks in.
I think everybody feels that, though. Like one of the things obviously we've been on this podcast is that we're very lucky to speak to people like yourself and everybody else who's been on the podcast, where the phenomenal business in Teesside, phenomenal business people, but every one of you shares the same trait, is that you don't want to promote yourselves. And I think it's a Teesside thing, where if you had like the businesswoman of, say, London or somewhere else, they might have been up on the podium going, I am the greatest ever, like I will destroy every businesswoman, but I may be completely wrong there, please no hate mail. But it's something that a lot of people share the same trait when it comes to Teesside. That we had Paul Card, who he was one of the first people to come on the podcast, and he does a lot of great work with the Philanthropic Foundation. I know you do, and you recently did Eat Out, that we'll talk about in a second actually. But we had to pull it out of him, like the work that he did with that and Bowick and things like that, where you know a lot of people in Teesside don't want to shout about it. So.
No, you're right, and I think that one of the reasons why so many women did get behind it, because I spoke to a fantastic head teacher, Katrina Morley, who was also nominated, and we were talking about it being a little bit embarrassing, and she said, well, yes, it is, but actually it's really important that we do it, because we need to really inspire other women and other girls in the area, and I completely and wholeheartedly agree. And I think it's really important that this isn't seen as a minority group, so that the Women in Business Awards aren't there because women feel like victims. We're not second-class citizens. It's about celebrating a lot of amazing work that's being done in a range of sectors, some fantastic stories, and there was such a breadth of industries and everything represented. So that was fantastic. And I think it's just making sure that women and girls know that they can go and do it. There are some amazing examples of people already doing that. But a lot of people often use, whether it's race or gender, they can use it as an excuse. And basically the message is, don't. Just get out there and do it, because so much can be achieved. And I think if you look back at people like Margaret Thatcher. I know that might not go down well as a great example, but Margaret Thatcher, as a woman with all the old Tories, would anyone have really thought that she'd ever be Prime Minister? You could say that about Barack Obama. First African-American president. People said it would never happen. And there are some just amazing examples of female leaders, and we need more role models. For example, Janet Yellen, the head of the Federal Reserve, an incredible example, one of the top banking jobs in the world. But actually, do many girls at school know that? When they're studying economics at school, do they know that those jobs exist for girls? I think there's so much more that we could do to empower and inspire and raise aspiration.
Especially talking about like a lot of the work, like just even in school and stuff like that, like some of the great female inventors and stuff like.
Absolutely.
Madame Curie or Madame Curie who invented radium. I can't remember. But even still, there's like so much that we talk about. Like I thought it was a phenomenal event.
No, it was. It really was.
I thought like Dave and Martin were like really hit the nail on the head. Like I felt bad for them when people were coming out and saying whatever. Like I thought like their intent was from a really pure place.
It really was, and I think there's real positivity around that will continue to grow. I hope it'll snowball, and I hope that the event gets bigger and bigger, and that it reaches many students in the area. There's also a fantastic organisation called Inspire to Learn. I don't know if you know about that, but Inspire to Learn, there's a guy called Andrew Stogdale who works relentlessly over in Middlesbrough. And what he has is a centre where he brings students from schools all over the Tees Valley and invites business people to come and speak to them about different industries, occupations. There are women at work days, there are English at work days, there are STEM days, all sorts of different things. And I would like to see loads more things like that happening, but really inspiring and raising aspiration among young females in Teesside.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I just previously alluded to is that you are very involved, like you said, in a couple of other things and doing great work within the community. You're heavily involved with like Philanthropic Foundation and recent event Eat Out. I know we've previously done a video for Eat Out and things like that that's out there, but can you tell anybody who's listening what CEO Eat Out is and what it was?
Okay, so CEO Eat Out stemmed from the fantastic work that was being done by CEO Sleep Out. Have you done one yet?
No. I know one was the other Mike from Course and both Jonathan from AA and who just did one. Where
you must do it.
Andy's been to tell me that. I'm going
I can recommend it. Yes, it's cold. So take something warm. I've got a great coat if you want to borrow it, and it doesn't look too bad. But the work that the CEO Sleep Out are doing is incredible, and I think they've raised something like £2 million now for a range of causes, and it also had a fantastic impact in raising awareness of homeless issues. Some of the funds from the CEO Eat Out have also funded the wonderful charity restaurant The Fork in the Road in Linthorpe Road. And Bianca Robinson, who works with CEO Sleep Out and is doing a great job over there, asked me if I'd do another Sleep Out. And I've done a few, and I'm always happy to support the fundraising events, but there's a limit to how much you can do in terms of fundraising and sponsorship. So what I suggested was that myself, and I knew that Katie would be on board, and a few people from Soundtraining, Lexonic, that we could actually do a CEO Eat Out, where we could take over the restaurant, The Fork in the Road, and use it as a fun way of raising awareness of the project, having a team event, and generating more funds for the charity. So the idea went from there. We did it a couple of months ago, and it was really good fun. Hard work and a much later night than I expected. But since then, somebody else has just done it. Emily Bentley.
The second one's just happened. I know Lou Murray, who was a part of it.
Absolutely. I was just going to say Emily Bentley and a few other women from the Tees Valley business club got involved, which was amazing, and they did a fantastic job on Friday night. I popped in to see them, and there are some others booked. So it's brilliant because people are seeing it as a way of supporting the charity, using it as a team event, and that has so many other benefits. So there's one organisation who are going to have a large team event, and we're going to book a venue. They're going to do it there instead, and the managers are getting involved, and they're inviting people to come along. Let's see how much money they can raise in tips, and there are loads of different ways that people are raising money and contributing to that. So loads of advantages from a business and a charitable perspective.
I thought it was a phenomenal idea when I heard it. I didn't realise that you actually cheated by having a background in working in a restaurant before though. So So
that's fair.
fair comment, you kind of gamed the system a little bit there.
Yeah, no, I did, but I'm glad it started something that other people are picking up.
Oh yeah, it's phenomenal. It's great to see like the work that people like yourself are doing and raise money that stays on Teesside and really benefits families on Teesside. So anybody who's listening, please support it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so one thing that we do with every single person who comes on the podcast is we blindside them by all asking them the same 3 questions.
Oh no.
We do, yeah. The same questions. We like people's. Everybody's different, and there's no right answer to them. But the questions are in order. First one is, what does success look like to you personally? Because it is so varied, and we've had so many different answers that have been phenomenal. Some people have literally said, "I want a Lamborghini and $1 million in the bank." Some people have said that I just want to build the biggest business ever. Some people have said, I want to spend more time with my kids, whatever it is. And everybody's different. There's no right answer, but it's great to see people's different perspective on it. The second thing is, have you ever had in your life a setback or a failure that has later led to successes? So failure is a very, final word, and I don't like to, but where a lot of people have used examples of, say, where they've been made redundant, that's actually led them to starting their own business and now where they are. There was a phenomenal person who, I want to say, had 3 heart attacks, and that led him to changing his life around and starting his own business. And like, everybody's different, and some people have just had really minor stuff that's led to really good stuff. And the last one is one thing or one item that you are obsessed with at the moment. We've had everything from gadgets to TV shows to Dan Main, who was really obsessed by, he has a drone company, and he was going to pick up a new drone that afternoon, so he's really excited to get out the door as quick as possible so he could go play with it. So again, it's just like a wide variety of stuff. Okay. So we'll start.
Thanks for that, Mike.
Yeah, it's okay. We like to do it. We had the person who was on last week had their marketing manager watch previous podcasts, so they knew and had something prepped. Right. It's boring when people prep it. I really like to shine a light in people's eyes and catch them off guard.
Okay.
So the first one is, what does success look like to you?
Okay. This may sound a bit fluffy, but what success looks like to me is to take Lexonic as far as we can. And what that means is, so our vision as a company is to raise literacy levels around the world. And that obviously is huge. Yeah. That's quite a huge mission. And we're on that journey. Katie started the company 7 years ago. I joined her 6.5 years ago. We're at a very, very exciting time, already working, like I say, out in the Middle East, out in 3 states in America and throughout the UK. But there's so much more. So much more. So success for me will be for us to reach as many people as we can with Lexonic in a range of different formats. Yeah. So we can raise literacy levels, we can raise English language levels, and that the brand Lexonic and Katie will be known for this remarkable thing that she's achieved.
And yourself as well, like what we've talked about, it's just the incredible things it will do for the small thing of helping the people there, like the effect that it will have on their lives.
It's
that they
amazing,
don't realise till now I look back on where my mum made me sit down and read Spot the Dog book, where then it was just because they wanted a kid to read, but now
absolutely. And like I've said, the diversity of the job and the scope and the potential. We work in prisons. We have, and it's absolutely incredibly emotive when you see the impact it has on men in prison who just haven't had the opportunity to access literacy like we provide. So it's, and then similarly you could flip over to the Middle East to really high performing British school, and kids are like, this is amazing, I wish I'd had this years ago. So we need to get it out there.
It's phenomenal. Hopefully we can help with a little bit of it.
Thank you.
So the second one is, have you ever had a setback or what you perceived as a failure at the time that has later led onto a success or point you on the right path, or however you know?
Well, do you know what, I think if I was going to be completely honest there, I'd have to be quite open and say that when my relationship broke down with my daughter's father, and I decided to be back up here in the northeast, my life obviously took a completely different turn. In some ways, you could argue that if that hadn't happened, well, you could definitely argue that if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't be sat here talking to you now, and I wouldn't have met Katie Parkinson, and we wouldn't have been able to do what we do together. So yes, I've had some really, really difficult times, but I knew that I wanted to do something really significant. I wanted to have one more shot at something really serious and put everything into it. And I was really fortunate in that I was in the place at the right time and met Katie Parkinson.
Yeah, one thing that we're definitely seeing as a trend across everyone, that everybody has these moments where, you know, you're down and, you know, no matter who it is who you think flying high now, they had moments of, you know, despair or being really low. And it does, like, we are seeing a trend of where people that did face something really low and then, like I said, not took a U-turn, but allowed them to have a vision and move out of it. So it's great for, especially people listening who are going through it currently. It's great.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the ironic things is that when I went back to university because I was decided to go back into education, I thought that would fit really well with me as a single mum, and so that. But actually, as many teachers know, it's really long hours anyway. But I ended up doing many more hours than I ever expected. But because I love it, it doesn't matter. I'm so passionate about it, and yeah, like I say, we just want as many people to benefit from it as possible.
It's phenomenal. Okay, so the last one is one item or thing or whatever it is that you are obsessed about at the moment. Oh, obsessed is a really harsh term actually, but really into it, you know.
Do you know what the first thing that came to mind when you said is that I don't watch any telly.
Yeah.
I really, really don't. But well, apart from Saturday night, I do watch Strictly with my daughter. That's our one thing.
Always makes me think of Christmas when Strictly comes on.
Absolutely.
I don't know why.
So we go around to some lovely friends of ours, and we have a Saturday night family TV session. That's great. But the one thing that I have started to obsess over is House of Cards, and I know I'm really late to the game. I know I'm really late to the game. But a friend recommended it, and I started to watch it. So occasionally, when I have an hour, I will. I'm only on series 3, but I'm really into it, and I'm loving it.
We started to watch that, but I really liked it, and my wife didn't.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of, well, it means we don't watch it anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's really good.
So you can relate to that, can
you?
you?
I can.
Yeah.
It's a great TV show.
Absolutely.
We've had a few people who've said TV shows.
Okay.
I nearly forgot to ask somebody, and they were really wanting to talk about Game of Thrones. It was Mike who's in the office next door, and he was absolutely really wanting to talk about Game of Thrones.
There are so many amazing series and dramas and things that I'd love to catch up with, maybe in another life.
Yeah, when a bit more time. There's 2 of you.
But sometimes when I'm away travelling, I do watch the odd episode, and I love it, and I'd like to see that through.
Yeah. You can download, if you've got an iPad, Netflix onto an iPad, so you don't need an internet connection. When you're doing long haul, wherever it may be, you can get a series of House of Cards in if you're not working, which is probably what you're doing. Okay, so if anybody's listening who's in the education sector or anybody wherever would like to learn more about Lexonic or Soundtraining, where's the best place for them to find you?
Well, website, which is lexonic.co.uk.
Yep, these will all be linked in the description, by the way.
And we can talk to teachers. We have a team throughout the country who can pay a visit, and teachers or head teachers can talk to. We have an amazing team who will give loads of advice and find out what the challenges are within individual schools and point them in the right direction.
That's phenomenal. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I always learn so much when we chat about education.
Thank you.
This has been the Teesside Business Podcast. The Teesside Business Podcast is promoted and produced by Person to Person Marketing. Thank you very much for listening.